I didn't know if I had landed in the hospital or if I had landed in hell or heaven or wherever I was.
Challenges. There's no denying we all have them. These are the stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and emerging better on the other side. I'm Cheryl Hunter. As a teenager, I was kidnapped and held captive. Today, my mission is to let you know that you are bigger than anything that can ever come your way. Join us for these extraordinary stories and be reminded that your true nature is to rise. What if you lost all the people who mattered most to you, and it happened all at once? That's exactly what happened to Mary. Mary, you have overcome more challenges than any 10 people put together, and yet you've managed to rise, you managed to come together, you managed to overcome in a way that could teach people so much. Tell me how you do that.
This is my newest trophy. It is Project Cimiluca. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Yes, when your story continues. These are for suicide survivors. And of course, being an angel lover, I decorated mine with angel wings. So that tells you something about how far down I went. I grew up in a rural farming community in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and I had a big family. I was blessed with a gifted mind and a gifted curiosity gene. I had a wonderful family. My father was my best teacher. He taught me everything I need to know about everything in this world. In fact, there's a funny story. I still go out. He used to tell me when I would go to school in the morning, when you leave, God is watching. Now be sure you give him a good show. And even now, even this morning, I went to come up here and I said, now God's watching, Mary. Be sure you're going to give him a good show today. I had really bad lung disease and still do. And so I suffered from severe asthma my whole life. Not the most pleasant thing to have when you grew up on a tobacco farm. And yet I overcame that, got a great education, went on to move to Washington, D.C. after that, and met the dream love of my life, my Mr. Darcy, my Rhett Butler, all rolled into one man. He was fabulous, a young actor from New York City. And then I just had a wonderful life until my own personal reign of terror began.
Will you share about this reign of terror that happened in your life?
I guess I was around 38 to 40 when it began. My grandmother became ill and passed away. I was very close to her, so I was very upset. My father, my mother, my best friend from college died. My roommate that I had before I moved to DC. Then my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And for 5 years we suffered through that, one horrendoplasty after the other, one alternative treatment after the other. I remember the day that I saw the x-rays and I looked at them and I knew where it was going. But I never told him because I always wanted to be upbeat and, have hope. But I cried in the bathroom for an hour and I just couldn't get myself together, and he heard me crying and he came to the door and he said, sweetheart, we're not going to do it this way. We're just not. And when my father died, I wouldn't go out of the house for almost a year. When my husband died, I wouldn't go out of the house for 3 years. I didn't go to work, I didn't go to church, I didn't buy groceries, I didn't do anything. But I went deeper and deeper and deeper down into depression. And I like to say that, building up a complicated grief and not recovering from one before you get into the next builds up these pain bodies inside you that suddenly burst one day if you're not careful. And so I slowly but surely started coming back into life. And then my best friend of 36 years and her husband were murdered. And I lost my mind, Cheryl. I laid down in the middle of my kitchen floor like this and I started praying to God, beam me up, please. I cannot take this anymore. Send me an angel. Send me some kind of sign that you want me to survive. I woke up in a hospital in Fairfax, Virginia, in a psych ward, strapped down to a psych bed, and I had been there 9 days before I woke up. I guess I had a complete break with reality, and the neighbors heard me screaming, and they called the rescue squad, and they brought me to the hospital. And I didn't know if I had landed in the hospital or if I had landed in hell or heaven or wherever I was. The place was stark white, And I woke up and I thought, what am I doing here? And then I started to remember the pain and started crying and crying. And then they would give me more drugs and I would go out again for another day or two and then I would come back. And finally one day I said to myself, I'm just not going to keep taking this medication or I'll never survive this. They were piling on these antipsychotic drugs and stuff, and I was having leg cramps so severe that I could barely walk. I was dying in there. So I said to my psychiatrist, I'm going to check myself out of here if you don't stop these drugs. He said, you're going to go home from here, and if you closed your eyes and look around, how many pictures of people who are alive would be on your walls or sitting on your piano? No one, because everybody in my life was dead. And he said, you can't keep living here doing that, looking at that every day. And that was on the one hand. On the other hand, he said, I'd like for you to read this book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I said, oh, I know all about Frankl. I studied him in college, and I met him in 1985 with another one of my client groups. And I don't need to read that book. He said, humor me, just read it anyway, because your story mirrors Dr. Frankl's story. I said, don't put me and Frankl in the same sentence. I mean, that's an insult to him. I mean, and he said, well, he had to overcome the same kind of things you're facing today when he came back into, from the death camps into Vienna and realized that he had lost his whole family. So he said, if you plan a new life and you promise me you'll do it, I'll let you out before the 21 days mandatory stay in the hospital. I said, okay, I'm on that business plan. So I got busy, I created a business plan, I formed my board of directors in my mind, I chose my lawyer, I figured out where I wanted to live. I said, how will I survive the best with these lungs? I'm probably marching toward a lung transplant at some point. And I figured that I needed to be in a warm climate. I like to be by the ocean, so I started doing research.
So there was quite some synchronicity when you finally moved to California. Tell me about that, Mary.
Well, as I've told many people before, I was standing in a vat of mud with my heart sinking, sinking, sinking. I could not find a way to straighten up. When I first got out here, I spent days in bed and crying and carrying on. I mean, I just couldn't figure, how am I going to go back to work? How am I going to start a new life? I went down to San Diego and I attended the conference called the Erickson, I believe that was the Brief Therapy Conference sponsored by the Erickson Foundation. There I met a young man who was from Austria, who was running around doing interviews with famous psychiatrists from all over the world, of a director, and he was building a documentary about Dr. Viktor Frankl. Well, when I found that out, I'm like, no way. And we just became buddies, and throughout the conference we were cutting up in Atkins City and running around and doing work. And after the show was over, I went down to the hotel coffee shop for dinner, and he came in and said, can I have dinner with you? I said, sure. And people started coming up to our table and patting him. Oh, Alex, I'm so honored to meet you. Oh, Alex, please give your grandmother my best. Oh, Alex, when you get back to Vienna, tell your grandmother how much I love your grandfather's work. Well, even a dumb person could figure out something's amiss here. He's not some kid with a camera running around. So I said, who are you really? I'm missing something. And he laughed. He said, I'm nobody. They just want information about my grandfather. I said, okay, I'll bite. Who's your grandfather? And he said, Viktor Frankl. I said, shut up, I was married to Elvis. He said, I thought it was a joke. No, it's true. Now, that's an amazing coincidence to go from my psychiatrist walking in 7 years before into my hospital room and saying, reread Man's Search for Meaning, and meeting his grandson. We made a film about his grandfather together, and love has been pouring into me from all over the world because of the Frankl connection since then. Vat of mud, vat of love. Doesn't get much better than this. And just like Dr. Frankl always said, regardless of the circumstances in your life, and that's one of the messages I like to tell people, you can always find meaning. Moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, or year to year. It's always there, it's always cooking in the background. You just have to uncover it. Doing the work I do is meaningful, and there's no accident that God put me on this planet to do this project. So I would go out every day, I would discipline myself to go out every day and spend some time in the sunshine, and I just suddenly started realizing that the pain wasn't going to be there forever.
What would you say to somebody who's suffering and feels like their challenges are bigger than they are?
Well, I'm an administrator for an online depression group now. We have 9,200 people on the website and 4,500 people on our Facebook page. And there are 6 of us who are administrators, and we deal with this every day. I donate 15 hours a week to this group. And every day somebody's going to kill themselves. Somebody's been molested. Somebody's a victim of child abuse they can't heal from. Somebody doesn't have hope. And I tell them the same thing. If all you can do today is put your toe on the floor, that's good enough. So realize that it's those small incremental steps that you take every single day that get you to the next place. Take that step, and yes, it's meaningful. Next week, make the goal to take a shower. Because one of the things we do is let our personal appearance go. When you're in the throes of depression, you can't get out of bed, you can't take a shower, you can't get your hair done. You can't do anything. Understand that the light comes after the darkness, and it's inevitable because we have everything we need to succeed inside. We just have to let it happen. And focus on giving to others as much as you can, because if you live your life from the inside out and not from the outside in, most of your days are going to be wonderful. That's been my mantra my whole life, and I'm still doing it.
So Mary, what is next for you?
People have been after me for years to write my life story, because growing up in the 50s and 60s in the South, in a relatively poor state, hardworking, farm girl, to being in here tonight in Hollywood talking to you, is really kind of a stretch, I want to give people what I call the real HDL. That's going to be the title of my book I write. Hope, decision, and love. The real HDL. That's it. And I'll lead from the heart. And then we'll see what else happens. Thank you for letting me come today.
It is such a joy. You lead by example.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary shows us that with intention, planning, and dedication, we can overcome anything that life throws at us. I'll see you next time.